Hello everybody, it's Mel. Thank you for joining me today for a recent reads video. So today I am going to be talking to you about 6 books that I have read recently, 4 books that I read in September, and 2 books that I have now read in October. I used to do monthly wrap-ups and I've changed relatively recently to do recent reads because I was finding that I was just fairly inconsistent with how much I'd read each month, and it made sense to do it like this. I am considering potentially starting to do vlog style wrap-ups, which would mean I'd probably go back to monthly, but it would be vlog style, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So let me know in the comments below what you prefer. Did you prefer monthly, and do you care how many books there are in a given month? Because it would mean that I would be posting more regularly recent reads, which don't seem to do that well overall, and potentially might only be a couple of books. Or would I be better off doing somewhat consistently but slightly less so recent reads where I talk about 4 or 5, 6 books? Or do you mind it being vlog style? So let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I'm talking about 6 books today. So I'm going to start with the book that I finished first, and the book that I finished the last will be the last book I talk about, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's the plan. Starting with the first book that I finished in the month of September, which was Calabasas, and have I lent that to someone? No, I have not. However, I have left it in the other room, and Baby Book Fiend is having a bit of a tricky day today, so I'm not 100% sure that I'm actually going to get it, because I don't think that would serve anyone any good. So we may just be doing on screen. I actually own quite a few of these, but anyway, that's not important. You guys don't really care. So, Calabasas by R.F. Kuang. I gave this one 4.86 in the Peach scale. So the Peach scale is a rating system that I have borrowed from Erin Smith. She is a predominantly journal channel, but she does talk about books that she's reading as well. So I will link her in the description below. I've upped it to 5 stars in Goodreads and just in general, because I do think it's worth the 5 stars in terms of writing style and the way that it's been put together. But in terms of my enjoyment, it didn't quite... It's not that it didn't hit 5 stars, it's more that it didn't hit a favourite. And I talked about this in the actual Calabasas vlog, which I will link down below as well, if you'd like to go and check that out and watch me think about it as I go through and read it. I will warn you though, it's a very random vlog. But anyway, yeah, so I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, it's not a favourite, so I didn't feel like I could give it 5 stars, but then at the same time I feel like it's worth 5 stars, so I've upped it to 5 stars on Goodreads. So Calabasas by R.F. Kuang is the latest book by R.F. Kuang, and it is a dark academia style kind of paranormal. It's a little bit of a... I don't know that it's intended directly as a retelling of Dante's Dante's Inferno, I think, is the overarching series. But anyway, Dante, who wrote Dante's Inferno and a bunch of different books, I think, within that series that are about someone's voyage through hell. And this definitely borrows a lot from Dante, but I don't know that it's meant to be a direct retelling so much as it borrows a lot from Dante. So the overarching plot is about Alice, predominantly, but also Peter. So we follow both characters, but like I said, we predominantly follow Alice. Alice and Peter are both attending Cambridge University, and they are studying analytical magic. So in this world, it's our world, but it's a different world, if that makes sense, a multiverse world, I guess. Anyway, sorry, I got randomly distracted because I think that's actually a term that's kind of been borrowed, I guess, by the Marvel universe, but it's not a Marvel universe book. It is like an alternate reality of our world in which magic is a real thing and you can study it at university, and that is what Alice and Peter are doing. Now, at some point before the book starts, their advisor, whose name something Grimes, has died and assumedly has gone to hell, and Alice has decided that she needs Grimes. She needs Grimes to help her get all the recommendations she needs, get the grades she needs, get help finishing her dissertation. So she decides that she's going to go to hell and she is going to bring Grimes back. And then as she's doing the spell that she needs to do in order to go to hell to get Grimes, Peter comes along and has basically the same idea, and he interrupts her and essentially says, "You need me." So she agrees to have him go with her. Now, throughout the story, you start to realise that Peter and Alice have a bit of a history together, and for a little while you're not really sure what the history is, but that starts to become clear as the book goes on. We start to learn more and more about both Alice and Peter, as well as learning more about how hell works in this world. And what I found really, really interesting, which I think is something that some people are finding a little bit pretentious and is dragging down the rating for them, I found really interesting and actually really enjoyed. Hell is real, and going to hell is something that people can and in fact have done. So works like Dante, works like Tennyson, I can't remember the poem, but apparently Tennyson wrote a poem about going to hell, works like Virgil's Aeneid, the Odyssey by Homer, all the different works that have been written imagining that the main characters or some of the characters have journeyed into hell. All of those stories and myths are real. They really happened, and the stories are accounts of that really happening. So Alice and Peter have both studied these various different accounts to help them to figure out what hell's going to be like, what to expect, what they need to take, how they need to react, what they should expect. But of course, the reality is quite different from what they expect, despite all of their knowledge and research. So they journey through hell and they are trying to find Grimes. They're going through all the different levels of hell. So it is quite similar in that respect to Dante. And like I said, we discover lots of different things about both of the main characters, both Peter and Alice, as we go through. I have also heard a few people say that one of the reasons they didn't like the book as much as they potentially expected or at all because they didn't particularly like Alice. And I will agree, she's not the most likeable character. There are certainly some things that have been written in there, particularly in her approach to feminism, which I didn't particularly appreciate. However, I will say that it is set in the 1980s. Alice is one of the people in the 1980s who kind of were almost anti-feminist as a backlash against feminism. So feminism in the 60s and 70s, it was different for different people obviously, but there was a lot of there's like burn your bras. There was quite radical feminism and quite, in a lot of respects, anti-male feminism and anti kind of the establishment of the beauty myth, a lot of people who were doing the whole not shaving underarms, legs, etc., not wearing makeup, burning bras, all of that sort of thing. And so a lot of people in the 80s, particularly in the academic world, were kind of almost backlashing against that kind of brand of feminism, if you will. And so as much as I did not agree with Alice's perspective on feminism, I definitely understand where it was coming from because it's definitely set, it's historically accurate is the thing, whether you like it or not. And no shade to the people that don't like it, that's totally fair enough. But for me, it was not off-putting because it definitely fit within the context of the historical context and the type of character that Alice was. But then because of that, some things that happened to her, again, were definitely understandable and also would have been probably happening. So yeah, anyway, I didn't think Alice was particularly likeable, but I appreciated the way that R.F. Kuang wrote her. And you're kind of set up to think that Peter isn't necessarily that likeable as well, but then you start to learn about some of the things that have happened to Peter and his life, and you start to realise maybe he's actually is likeable, which I really appreciated. I really, really enjoyed, like I said, all the different sort of explorations of the different myths and accounts and legends and stories about going to hell, about people travelling to hell. Liked those references. Even for someone who hasn't read Dante, I know enough about Dante to kind of appreciate it. I know I've read Virgil, I've read the Aeneid, I've read the Odyssey. I haven't read everything that was being referenced, but I've certainly at least heard of everything that was being referenced, with the exception of the Tennyson poem. I really appreciate it's like any time you get a reference to literature in books, I really appreciate that. It's just a little nod to readers, and I felt like this was a nod to classicists, to people who study ancient history and classics and religion and those sorts of things. So I really appreciated that as a person who has studied those things. But yeah, I thought it was really well written. I love Arif Pong's writing style. You can definitely see that she is a person who studied those things, and she is definitely a very intelligent, very well read, very well researched person, which again is, I guess, I can understand why people maybe are turned off a little bit by that, because it does kind of read a little bit, it can read a little bit like, well, I've studied this stuff, how good am I, how awesome am I, etc. I personally don't read it that way. Maybe I'm one of those people. Who knows? I hope I hide it well. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of understandable why people might not appreciate that, because it does read a little bit like intellectual snobbery, but I personally don't mind that, and also didn't particularly think that, but I can understand why people might feel that way. But yeah, so 4.865 on Goodreads. Absolutely fantastic. Not as good as Babel, and I was a little bit disappointed because I wanted it to be a favourite, and it ended up not quite getting there. A little bit longer than I felt like it needed to be, but overall I enjoyed it, and yeah, it's definitely up there with books that I have enjoyed, if that makes sense. Alright, the next book that I read and finished was Sleeping Murder by Agatha Christie. So I actually ended up listening to this on audio, and I actually ended up really enjoying this one. As with most Agatha Christie books, they are reasonably short, they are quite easy to read, they're actually quite easy to listen to, I personally find. As you know, probably, I'm not a massive audiobook consumer, but I do quite enjoy having an audiobook on the go so that I can listen to it if I'm, washing up or cooking or whatever. I don't always, that's why I don't end up finishing them quickly. That's neither here nor there as well. But anyway, yes, so I did enjoy this one. It is a Miss Marple, which is I like Miss Marple. I like her Poirot. I like Agatha Christie, but I think Marple's my favourite of all the detectives. I gave this one a 3.3 in the Peach scale, which I rounded down to 3 stars on Goodreads because, well, essentially you can either do 3 stars or 4 stars, and I didn't think it was, I would have rounded it up to 3.5 had I been able to. Put it like that. So it's pretty middle of the road for me, not super memorable, but definitely a solid read that was interesting. I actually had seen this one, I think a BBC miniseries version of this book, of this story before, and so I kept being like, am I remembering correctly? But anyway, yeah, I enjoyed it. I don't really have a lot to say about this one. It is about a young woman who, she's English, but she grew up very young, she grew up in India, and then most of her life from about 3 was spent in New Zealand. And she's married recently into an English person, and she moves back to the UK, and she goes to, he's I think in the war, and she goes to try and find a house for them, and she finds this house, she buys it, and then she starts discovering little things in the house that are jogging her memory, and she starts to realise that she's actually been here before, but she didn't even know she'd been in the UK before, and it turns out that she had been in the UK. She moved to the UK briefly after her mother died in India and lived in this house. It was probably for like 6 months maybe, and then she remembers that she witnessed a murder, but there's no record of a murder having taken place. She doesn't even know who the person is. She remembers the name, but she doesn't know who the person is. And then it's all about her and Miss Marple alongside as like a assistant, I guess. It's all about her and her partner and Miss Marple trying to figure out what happened. And yeah, like I said, I enjoyed it. So yeah, that's that. Alright, next up I read Dragon Fruit by Micaiah Lucia. So I actually read this one for my book club, which is the Book Fiends Book Club, which I run quarterly. So the book that we read for July, August and September was Dragon Fruit by Micaiah Lucia. Yeah, I really, really enjoyed this one as well. I gave it initially a 3.5, but I've actually rounded that up to 4 because of the conversation that I had with the people in the live show. So Paige from Pages with Paige was the other person on camera with me, and then there were a few different people in the comments, and we ended up having a really good conversation about it. I ended up deciding that actually it was really well written, and it was quite a lot more nuanced than it sort of seemed like on the surface once I'd talked about it a bit more. So I upped it to 4. So this is a book that is set in the, I keep in my head saying the Peloponnese, which is in Greece, and not at all Polynesia, which is what I am actually meaning to say. So it is a retelling of a Polynesian myth. I don't know anything about the actual myth, but it is about a young woman who, when she is like 3 or 4, she falls really, really ill at the same time that the princess that she's the handmaiden of falls really, really ill, and it's because they both drank the same thing. And there's this legend about sea dragon eggs. They have to do some kind of ritual with the sea dragon eggs, and it's not eating, it's a whole thing. Anyway, I don't really remember it very well, but you do this thing and you can kind of, I guess it's like, grant the wish of the person doing it. It's going to be done for the princess, for the queen. The father of this handmaiden, which not, I don't even know what she is because she's like 3 or 4, but anyway, the father of this girl steals the final egg and goes off and does the thing with his daughter so that she is saved. So anyway, she has been spending most of her life actually hunting for sea dragons. She goes back to her island and then things happen from there. I won't go any further into any more detail, apart from anything else, because I seem to be struggling to remember it. But I did actually really enjoy this one. Like I said, I thought it was really well written. It is young adult and it reads quite, well, I mean, it doesn't read quite young. It reads like young adult. So it reads young for me, but I think that it would be really great for the audience, target audience, because I think there's a lot of nuance, particularly around the romance within the story and around this girl sort of coming home and figuring out her place in the world and that sort of thing. So yeah, definitely think it's worth a read. Ended up upping my rating to 4 stars, and that was Dragonfruit. So next book that I finished in the month of September is The Wedding People by Alison Ispach, I think is the name. So this is the book that I picked for another YouTuber's TBR, or seen on another YouTube video. Seen on another YouTube video is the prompt, and it was on another YouTuber's TBR. So that YouTuber is Bo's Books, I think is the name of the channel. I will link it down below as well. I'm pretty sure Bo did not like the book, but I actually did. I've heard this one has quite mixed reviews. So anyway, this is about a woman whose partner has recently broken up with her and moved in with his girlfriend who he was having an affair with. They've had all sorts of issues to do with fertility and IVF, and they never ever actually managed to have a baby. And then now he's had this affair and left her. And she's just feeling completely despondent and completely just not happy at all. She decides to go to this hotel where her partner, her ex-husband and her had talked about going for their like anniversary, I guess, for like a, what do they call it? It's not an anniversary, like second honeymoon. It's super expensive, but it's a beautiful hotel, and she decides to go there. She realizes when she gets there that she is going to be the only member, the only person who's not a member of this wedding party, or this group of people there for a wedding. And she's kind of like, the hotel staff are a bit kind of confused by this, and they assume she is, and so she kind of accidentally gets like kind of brought into the wedding on her first day there. And so she ends up in the lift with the bride, or the soon-to-be bride. The bride ends up sort of just inserting herself in this woman's experience. They end up having many conversations throughout the next few days. She ends up spending a lot of time with these people, the wedding people, throughout the next week, and she kind of gains a new perspective, a new lease on life. And then through her interactions with these various people, they gain new perspectives, new lease on life, and it's just about their interactions and how things change, and maybe how you maybe don't want, like what you think you want might not be what you want, and expectations versus reality, and why people make decisions that aren't right for them, and different things like that. But yeah, I thought it was really well written. Like I said, I thought it was quite nuanced, and it explored all of those different things that I just mentioned really, really well. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. I don't have much more to say about it other than the fact that I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars. So I give it 4 stars. 3.48. So I guess it's more like 3.5 stars. Doing really well with this whole review thing, aren't I? Anyway, let's move on to the next book that I read, which I read in October, finished off in the first week of October, which was Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. Gave this one 5 stars, absolutely loved it. I love Victoria Schwab's writing style. I had heard that if you liked Addie LaRue, you would probably like this one, and I love Addie, and I really enjoyed this one, absolutely. Like I said, love her writing style in these books anyway. Haven't read any, I've read Gallant, sorry, but I haven't read earlier stuff. That's not important. I read Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil and absolutely loved it. Like I said, love V.E. Schwab's writing style. It is very lyrical and, yeah, very lyrical and kind of has that flowy kind of purple prose nature, but it's not too verbose, which is something that I find is a difficult line, but I definitely think that V.E. Schwab manages it, walks that line really, really well. So this is a story about a few different characters. So we have Alice in, I think it's 2019, so reasonably recently to now. We have Sabine from the 16th century in Spain and a variety of places, and then we have Lottie from Regency era England. We follow those different people and their different storylines, and essentially they are vampires, and it is about how they became vampires, how that's affected their lives, their experiences. I sent a message to someone whilst I was reading it saying, if you like Interview with the Vampire, you will like this. It is Interview with the Vampire but with lesbians, which I definitely think is true, although I know some people don't love Interviews with Vampire, so don't be turned off by that because the writing style is quite different. Like I said, it's a lot more lyrical, a lot more poetic, but it's got that similar vibe to it. Although, as my friend Max, who I was buddy reading with, as well as my friend Rachel, said there is a certain, how did she phrase, I can't remember how she phrased it, but she basically said there is like, now my brain is just not working. There are certain, like, oh, God damn it, what is limitations. There's certain limitations to writing vampire stories. Like, there are certain sort of, I guess, rules of vampires and how vampires work that mean that they end up actually being quite similar, and the limitations are always the same, because you have these immortal characters who are, yeah, they live forever, they look whatever age they were, so oftentimes reasonably young and often quite good looking, of course. So you have these characters who are like that, but because of the structure of vampires, they can't go out at night, they can't go out during the day, I should say, they only go out at night, they have to drink blood, they're unchanging, and so in a sense it's a very limited genre. She wasn't necessarily saying that was a bad thing, but it was just interesting to see, like, you know, like I said, it's like reading a lesbian Interview with the Vampire. Like, there's only so much that you can do. But having said that, I really enjoyed V.E. Schwab's take on it. I love the way she writes characters. It was an interesting character study, and how different people would respond to those limitations on their lives, and I just really enjoyed it. I loved it. Gave it 5 stars. Highly recommend if it's at all the kind of thing that you would like, if my comp makes any sense to you, and yeah, highly recommend. And then the final book that I want to talk to you about today is a book that I finished yesterday, I think, and that is Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake. Another book that I really, really enjoyed. I gave this one a 4.1. So basically 4 stars. And yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this one. So this is a romance, contemporary romance, quite a change from Bury Our Bones in Midnight Soil. Contemporary romance takes place in the US. We follow 2 different characters. We follow Iris Kelly and we follow Stevie. I can't remember her surname, but we follow Stevie. So we swap between their perspectives throughout the novel. Iris Kelly is, on the surface, she seems like she's someone who doesn't really want to be in a relationship, doesn't really believe in love, just wants to go out and have a good time, have hookups, you know. And then Stevie is someone who has a lot of anxiety, and she's struggling currently because she's relatively recently broken up with her long-term partner, who quite quickly after their relationship broke up started dating a good friend of theirs, and so Stevie is struggling a little bit with that, but overall just has anxiety in general. We follow those two characters who meet one night, they don't even end up having a one-night stand because the circumstances are quite disastrous when they attempt to do so, and they leave expecting not to see each other again. But Iris decides she needs a break, she needs something different, she needs a shake-up, and she decides, along with a friend of hers, to audition for this play. Meanwhile, Stevie is an actress, and she has been coerced, essentially, into playing the lead role in Much Ado About Nothing by the director / her ex-partner. They meet again after Stevie has essentially told her friends, including the ex, that she's now dating this woman who she actually had a not quite one-night stand, disastrous encounter with. Stevie basically tells Iris what's happened, and they agree to fake date, and it is about that. And of course romance ensues, etc. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I thought it was really well written. I thought the characters were really well done. We delve into Stevie's anxiety, and we delve into Astrid is one of the characters who has her own book. We delve into what's actually going on with Iris. We delve into why she feels like she is undateable, why she feels like she doesn't want to date, and we explore what's going on with her. The anxiety rep was incredibly well done, and I just really enjoyed it. I just thought it was really well written, and the characters were fantastically well done, very well rounded, which is something I always appreciate, and yeah, highly recommend. So that is my wrap up for the last month and a bit. I am still working through some books that I will be wrapping up next time, but yeah, that's everything that I want to talk to you about today. So let me know any thoughts that you might have about any of the books that I talked about today. Have you read any of them? Did you enjoy them? Did you not enjoy them? Let me know all of that in the comments below. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me the vampire emoji for my favourite book of the last month and a half. Like I said, that's everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. So thank you so much for joining me. I really, really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.